Hello, and welcome to our weekly dialogue with Helga Zepp-LaRouche. She's the founder and the chairwoman of the Schiller Institute. Today is July 30th, 2025. I'm Harley Schlanger, and I'll be your host. You can send your questions and comments to Helga via email at questions@schillerinstitute.org, or you can post them on the chat page. Now, some of you keep asking, well, what can I do? The most important thing you could do is join us. Share this video, get it around, go out and talk to people, organize. We're in the midst of an incredibly dangerous but also historic period of transition, and citizen involvement has never been more important. Now, Helga, let's begin with the Southwest Asia situation. There was the UN conference on the two-state solution on Monday and Tuesday. Lots of talk. Macron and Starmer spoke of support for the two-state solution, but postponed doing anything about it until the UN General Assembly meeting in September, 6 weeks away. And the killing is continuing. So what do our viewers need to know about the situation on the ground there?
Well, I think that we are witnessing the moral catastrophe of all of humanity, because the inability of the whole world community, but especially naturally governments, and there are in particular some governments who could do something about it and have not done anything about it, is, shedding a very, very catastrophic light on the moral condition of mankind at this point. And, I mean, in a certain sense, there is a shift going on for several days, accumulating, where now even NGOs from inside Israel are talking about genocide going on in Gaza. And even some Western politicians and media are picking up on the word genocide. But, in a sense, for example, Germany is now all of a sudden discovering that this cannot go on, and that they have to make air droppings of food, together with Jordan, into Gaza. This is so disgusting and a height of hypocrisy. First of all, previous efforts to drop food from the air have proven to be catastrophic, because it normally kills people, by just dropping the food on them, or people getting so desperate that they are trampling over each other. And, and it's a complete hypocrisy, because to bring in the entire amount of food dropped by a plane, you could just let one truck through, the entrances, and the same effect would be done. And that is obviously not challenged, that Israel has not been allowing that to go through. But this is going on since about 2 years, where the killing of, the news are not secret. The fact that IDF soldiers were enjoying killing children, that pictures were being shown of babies, starved to skeletons, that AI was used, to play crying of children to lure people out of the houses to then shoot them. I mean, it's a long, long, long list. All of this is in the public domain, because, unlike what happened more than 80 years ago in Germany, this has all been in the TV every day. So every living room in the whole world could watch this, and many of them did. So I think, it's reaching now a point where, some of the mainstream media are acknowledging it. You have people like Scott Ritter, who goes into a very blunt language, which I don't even want to repeat, given the fact that I'm here speaking from Germany, which is still a special place in this respect. But people can just go to Scott Ritter's Substack website and look at it for yourself. But the hypocrisy is absolutely enormous, because, Trump now came out with a new plan, supposedly, but there has been no sign whatsoever that the Netanyahu government was willing to go ahead with anything of that in reality. And what you have on top of it is that the West Bank is now being annexed. And there were many voices by basically saying, it's just a question of time when the entire Gaza Strip will be Jewish. Now, what we are watching right now is a catastrophe which I think is the mirror of the moral condition of the world, because all the people who just shrug their shoulders and say, there's nothing we can do about it. I mean, this, in a certain sense, it's the writing of the wall. And people should remember the poem by Heinrich Heine about Belshazzar, that the writing on the wall, was seen after the king and everybody was feasting. And then, you know how the whole thing ends. I think this is absolutely terrible. And I can only say that we have to renew our efforts to put the only solution on the table which would work, which is the Oasis plan, a two-state solution. The chance was missed essentially because the UN conference you just mentioned, which was called for by Macron and Saudi Arabia, did fall short. It was not attended on a high-level basis in the first place, and it did fall short of doing the kinds of changes which would have remedied the situation. But that doesn't mean we should give up on it. I think we have to redouble our efforts to put the two-state solution plus the Oasis plan, which have to be seen as a package, because otherwise it does not work, on the agenda. We have August and we have the UN General Assembly in September. In this period, this could be easily put on the agenda. The reason why our redoubling our efforts is so important is because there are now very competent and serious military experts. And I only want to mention Jacques Beau, who is a former Swiss intelligence analyst. He's still an analyst, but he's now retired and doing some think tank function. And he warned in the starkest possible terms that, that the ongoing genocide being portrayed in the eyes of the whole world may lead to a condition where Israel is losing its ability to exist, that it may cease to exist. But before that happened, naturally, it could lead to a nuclear war in the Middle East. And that is just one of the absolute terribly dangerous strategic situation, which means we have to have a new security and development architecture for the whole world, because the world is so far gone that I'm, since a long time, really convinced that unless we change the international architecture altogether in the tradition of the Peace of Westphalia, none of these regional issues can be addressed properly. But what you can do is join us. There are demonstrations planned. There are demonstrations on the 6th of August for the anniversary of Hiroshima. There are more demonstrations planned for the 1st of September, for some days in September, the 3rd of October. We are planning a major two nationwide demonstrations in Germany. Naturally, October is very far away, but get accustomed to the situation, to the idea that people have to go to the streets because there seems to be no other remedy, and that we have to protest against what's going on while at the same time demanding solutions, as I said, like the Oasis plan and a new security architecture. But you have to get mobilized, because this is reaching a point of absolute unbearability and intolerability.
You're listening to Helga Zepp-LaRouche. We're talking about the conference that just took place, the attempt to shift the situation in Southwest Asia. There are two questions that have come in. One is from a Palestinian activist who said, I still don't see how the adoption of a two-state solution will stop the Israelis from carrying out genocide. But there's a second question. Someone who's an Israeli citizen who now lives in Australia wrote in and said that she sees a shift occurring in Israel. She mentioned the two human rights groups you mentioned, B'Tselem and the Physicians for Human Rights in Israel, that openly came out and said what's being done to the Palestinians is a genocide. And also in Haaretz and other papers, columnists like Gideon Levy have been comparing this to the Nazi policy against the Jews in Germany. And she said that this breaks a taboo. In Israel, it was always a taboo to say that the Israeli policy was a genocide. But she said, now that this is being spoken out loud, does this create the potential for a change within Israel? And could this bring down Netanyahu?
Well, I think this taboo is not only broken in Israel, but I think, as I mentioned, even the mainstream media in Europe and even in Germany, which was the most controlled place, it's now breaking through because I mean the stories about what is actually happening, the joy some of these soldiers are portraying by killing babies, it's reaching a point where people just, it goes through the barriers of, that you cover it up and you make a face as if nothing has happened. Now, I think, this is a much, much bigger problem than just for Israel, because, my late husband, Lyndon LaRouche, always said at such similar situations, that this is a test of morality. Is mankind morally fit to survive or not? And it is my conviction for a long time that our inability to stop a genocide, which is being portrayed in front of the world's eyes, that is a measurement of our fitness to survive. And, Scott Ritter, in his very, very blunt video, basically says, that this is not something Trump has to live with, but, every American has to live with, and so does every other person, naturally, of whose governments are condoning it or letting it go. So I think this is a much, much bigger issue, and I think this will not go away because, this is what it will do to internal politics in Israel. One can only guess because, this effort to annex the West Bank, the argument that, Netanyahu has to make all of these things to keep Smotrich and Ben Gavir in the government. There are opposition politicians like Lapid and Olmert who are becoming more and more critical. And, maybe there is something going on in the military because military men normally have a better feeling of, when something becomes really counterproductive for the existence of a state. And I think we are reaching that point in Israel as well.
You're listening to Helga Zepp-LaRouche. You can still send in questions to us at questions@schillerinstitute.org. We have a couple things from the chat line. John North wrote, yes, the writing is on the wall for sure. Gaza now, the rest of us later. And it's also there are people commenting on children going to the food distribution center and then being shot by snipers. Now, there's some questions that have come in on the declassification of the Russiagate documents by Director of National Intelligence Tulsi Gabbard. And someone asked the question, where is this going? Do you think they're going to cover it up or just use it to break from to take away from the potential to act for Gaza or Ukraine? But where is this going, the Gabbard declassification?
Well, that is a very interesting question because, you would normally assume that if you have the Director of National Intelligence blaming the previous administration, the Obama administration, of having been involved in a coup against the first Trump administration, that this would lead to a huge debate in the media, that there would be state attorneys getting into action right away. Well, we are still waiting of any of these developments, and Tulsi Gabbard just a few days ago released a second batch of documents, supposedly documenting and proving this effort by Brennan, by Klepper, by various other people of the first Trump administration, of the Obama administration, of having been involved in this Russiagate, which we at the time, we published it. If you go back to the EIR archives, you will find that we were blasting the fraud of Russiagate from day one, practically. And, I think this is definitely a measurement of how far gone the United States is. At the recent IPC meeting last Friday, I asked Larry Johnson, um, who is a experienced insider in intelligence question. I said, who is stronger? Is it President Trump or the deep state? And Larry was very quick to say, naturally, the deep state. Now, that is a big question, and there are many signs that President Trump already lost a lot of the momentum which he had when he came in his second term. And it seems that the deep state is sort of, throwing the web of containment and getting involved in all kinds of sideshows and whatnot, that, they already have been able to tie down Trump to a very large extent in respect to Ukraine. Nothing is happening big in the Middle East. So I don't know. I think that one has to laud Tulsi Gabbard absolutely, that she has had, that she did what she did. And I can only hope that there is still some remnants of legal apparatus in the United States which will follow through on that. I mean, this is a big issue. And you can see that, Tulsi Gabbard apparently yesterday said, that the entire American mainstream media has not picked up on that. Now that's incredible. That means that you don't have a mass media. You have an extension of the deep state masquerading as journalists and editors. I mean, that you have to think about what that means. And again, that does give you a light of where we stand in terms of First Amendment, freedom of the press, and all of these things.
Well, remember that there was a big fight to try and keep Tulsi Gabbard out as Director of National Intelligence. And we drafted a white paper called the Liars Bureau, which was very useful to give people the real story of who is opposing her. And we're about to produce another white paper that will go through what's been released so far and where it could go. But we have a question from a regular participant from London who is referring to Trump's meeting with Starmer yesterday. And he writes, given the role of the Brits in manufacturing Russiagate and their role in the coalition of the willing to try and sabotage the US-Russian normalization, how could Trump trust Starmer?
Well, he obviously cannot and should not, but he has been convinced by this British faction of the empire to restart the delivery of some weapons to Ukraine. He's now supposedly angry at Trump. He has issued this first 50-day ultimatum for Russia to stop the war with a ceasefire, or else sanctions will be imposed. Now he has reduced that to only 10 days. And the Russians commented on that. I think it was former President Medvedev who said that every such step is one step closer to war. And I think this is very dangerous. I don't know why Trump is doing that. I mean, maybe he's over. It's over his head. Maybe he doesn't understand that it was the British who ruined his first administration. That it was the British who were behind Russiagate in the first place. I think that I can only speculate. Maybe his ego is so big that it can be manipulated. The idea that he soon will make a big state visit to Great Britain, and he liked it to be received by the royals the first time. I have no idea. I can only say it's a tragedy, and I can only hope that those people in his movement, in the MAGA movement, like Mrs. Taylor Greene and others who have proven to be remarkably, level-headed on many issues, that these people would step forward and shake him back into what he should be doing, and that's for sure not listening to the British.
Well, and that gets to the whole point of our listeners and viewers becoming active to make a bigger movement that can influence those people who are talking to Trump. Now, we have a question from an Iraqi war veteran who asks, what do you make of the reports that the US and the British are moving to oust Zelensky? Is that just a rumor or is that a serious effort?
Well, I think it could be a serious effort, given the fact that, Zelensky essentially has outlived his usefulness, and the Ukraine war. I mean, the thing which is so, it doesn't matter, if they replace Zelensky now with Saluzhny or somebody else, it does not really change anything on the battlefield. If you look at the situation, both the military situation in Israel following, the exchange with Iran, uh, the, the situation in Ukraine, both of these situations do not look very promising from a military standpoint. The Ukrainian war, by all estimates of experts, is lost. The Russians have won, even if you send the most far-reaching weapon systems into Ukraine, capable of reaching far into the territory of Russia, it does not change the situation that Ukraine is essentially destroyed. It's, they cannot refill the army. The young people are trying to escape recruitment. The economy is destroyed to a very large extent. So the danger that involves, and I can only agree with Jacques Beau, who basically makes the point that in both cases, Israel and Ukraine, rather than admitting that these wars did not function and are lost, that the danger is that they will go to the next higher level of weaponry, which is nuclear. And that, basically, that, if Germany would be so insane, and unfortunately the signs are going in that direction on the Taurus and similar long-range weapon systems being delivered to Ukraine, we are reaching the point of no return. And I can only, if there are any German people listening to our program, do anything you can with us to stop this insanity of this escalation. I mean, here we are in Germany, 80 years after the end of the Second World War. And, we had just the 80th anniversary of the Potsdam Declaration a few days ago. And in preparing a speech for that occasion, I looked at some of the documentaries. What was Berlin looking like in the final days, or in the weeks and months after the end of the World War, when Churchill and Truman were driving through Berlin, through the streets of Berlin. You can actually see the whole city was flat, rubble field, terrible. If you look at documentaries, the last 100 days of the war, bombs were falling, people were fleeing, there were displaced people, horror. People seem to have forgotten what war is. Now, the United States had not a war on their territory for, since the Civil War, essentially, but that was a different kind of warfare than the two world wars in the 20th century. And therefore, people may be more complacent about it, but people in Europe should remember either that they experienced it, or, like in my case, I heard stories from my relatives who were involved in the horrors of the war. This should really, I mean, war is destroying everything you have been working for. And, we have to get rid of this Merz government, because this guy is unconscionable. He is a former CEO of BlackRock. He is risking the existence of Germany by what he is doing. And I can only, hope that there are people around the world who call into Germany and say, what are you doing? Are you absolutely so, have you forgotten history so much that you are tolerating a government which is well, look what they are doing. I mean, I'm sorry, this is not an answer to the question, but I'm so upset about it. This von der Leyen, whom we now call Ursula Pinocchio von der Leyen, because every word she is speaking, her nose grows longer and longer and longer. And soon there will be not one room in the Brussels EU headquarters she can still fit in, because her nose will poke through all walls and windows. You know, she just agreed to a so-called trade deal with President Trump, which will be a blow to the German economy. You know, I mean, there are now mayors from smaller cities and towns who are calling on the federal parliament, on the government, saying, "What are you doing? You are ruining everything. You're spending money for enormous sums, but there is no money for schools. There's no money for repair of infrastructure. Yeah, there is, if the bridges for the upcoming war against Russia have to be fixed, then they spend money on bridges." We are in a crisis, and people have to wake up, because this is leading to a catastrophe in the short term. And, you know, I can only say this has to stop.
From Norma, who thanked you for the invitation to watch the Berlin conference. And she said she was very excited as an American to see Lyndon LaRouche's ideas spreading internationally. But she anticipated your comments about von der Leyen. She said, "Why did von der Leyen and the European Union submit to Trump on tariffs? Why do they want to fight wars? What's going on over there?"
Well, I can only say that the recent developments make very clear that, you know, those people who thought that Germany and all European nations are colonies of the United States have proven to be completely wrong. Because if we were a colony of the United States, we would now be, you know, in the camp of President Trump and you know, follow him. No, we are a colony of the deep state and the British Empire, of which the deep state is just the American facility. So I think that, you know, people have to wake up that we are under the control of an empire. It's not nations against nations. We are under the control of an empire, and that empire is not any one nation, but it is a system of oligarchical structures, of Wall Street, of the City of London, of Silicon Valley, and similar structures. And it is those institutions where people like von der Leyen obviously feel more affinity and loyalty to than their own people. I think von der Leyen must get out of her office as well, because, you know, these people are ruining Europe every day they are in that position.
I have a question from a former colleague of mine who said, "I studied history at an American university." This is someone who was in graduate school with me. And he said, "I never heard about the Peace of Westphalia. Is this part of the curriculum in history classes in Europe?"
Yes, it should be, and it was, you know, at least when I was in school, I still learned something about it. Then I can only advise you, read up on it quickly. I mean, go to the EIR archive. This is LaRouche Pup, larouchepup.com. And then you just start your research there. Because it turns out that whenever I go to research historic and other topics and look in Google or some AI or whatever, these things may be useful once in a while, but it almost always turns out that the EIR archives have the most profound research, because we have done that in-depth work for half a century, which is why you should absolutely subscribe to our daily alert, which is the daily continuation of that kind of analysis, and you will be updated on a daily basis. So that's my advice. But read up on it quickly, because if the world gets out of this crisis, it will only be through such an approach to put the Peace of Westphalia on the table seriously in the UN General Assembly, in the BRICS, any kind of institution like that. And or the 3 initiatives of President Xi Jinping, the global security, global development, and global civilizational initiative, which is essentially the same idea that you have to have a security architecture which takes into account the interest of every single country on the planet, or it will not work.
I have a final question for you, Helga. Actually, not a question, but I would urge our viewers to go online to look up the Berlin conference from last weekend. I was very happy that I could attend part of it. It was an incredible conference. It's available through the schillerinstitute.com website. And speaking of this kind of event, we have the International Peace Coalition meeting again on Friday. What can you tell us about what you expect at this week's meeting?
Well, first of all, on the Berlin conference, I can really only strongly suggest that you take the time to watch the entire thing, because we are getting an enormous amount of reverberation still 2 weeks later, because we had people watching it, participating in it, but then the word is getting around. And I'm very happy to report to you that we had an unprecedented number of alternative media coverage. I think we will put on the Schiller website a little category of publishing the links of all the articles which came out so far, which is quite amazing because it's now spreading. We just found out that a very famous Brazilian journalist, Pepe Escobar, put on his website, or his, I think website, the speech of Professor Zhang Weiwei from Fudan University, advising his followers to watch that speech of his good friend. And this is now popping up in Brazil. So then we had many interviews given by some of the participants commenting on their acquaintance with the Schiller Institute. We had now peace demonstrations in Dresden and some other cities where people are demanding to be briefed about this incredible historic conference which took place. So even if the conference is now 2 weeks over, the word is spreading. And I think this is a very good thing, because the reason why people are so open is because they have the profound feeling that we are in a very dangerous moment, and that the Schiller Institute does provide solutions for these threats and dangers. So please take the time to watch this. You can take one panel at the time, or even one speech at the time, but it's definitely something you will profit a lot from. Now, Dr. Pandor, the former foreign minister of South Africa, she at that conference urged people to help to make the International Peace Coalition a huge international peace movement, strong enough to really turn the tide. And that is what you should do by participating this coming Friday at 5 o'clock. I think we will hear from Ray McGovern, who was an in-person participant in the conference. There are obviously also people who will speak about the situation in the Middle East, in Gaza. So absolutely join us and help to build that forum to be really a voice which cannot be overheard.
And that's 11 a.m. Eastern Time, 5 p.m. Central Europe Time. Helga, I think we've covered quite a bit, and I know you're very busy, so thanks for joining us today, and we'll see you again shortly.
Yes, hopefully on Friday.